Barry Fusher. I'm the author of Brit Noir, which is a study of contemporary crime writing. I'm privileged to be talking to one of the best of the contemporary crop, Sarah Hilary. So an important issue for Marnie is victimhood, because she's very determined that she herself will not be a victim, but that's always hovering in the background for her.
Yes, absolutely, especially when she's encountering victims, and in Someone Else's Skin, she encounters a lot of victims who aren't like that, who aren't able to pick themselves back up again when they've fallen down, or who have chosen to stay hiding. They don't want to come out of the shadows, they don't want to start fighting back. And I think that makes her think again about what courage is. For her, courage is stepping out of the shadows and shaking off that cloak of victimhood. But in fact, some of the women that she meets in Someone Else's Skin who aren't doing that, who you may think therefore are remaining under this cloak of victimhood, she comes to see that the courage takes many forms, and it's not necessarily the path that she's taken is right for everybody.
So a recurrent theme in all three books so far, and there's a fourth on the way, is social commentary. Is this a theme that grew out of the books, or was it something that inspired you initially?
It grew out of the plot. There was a conscious decision with Someone Else's Skin to. I was very, very interested in the idea of having a crime that had lots of witnesses. I've been watching lots of programs on the television and reading lots of books where the crime took place in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, with no witnesses. And it just, perversely, I just thought, what would it be like if it took place in broad daylight, you know, with a room full of witnesses? And somehow it was harder for the police to get at the truth than the other version of the situation. And so that was my starting point for that. And then I thought, well, I knew I needed a closed environment. I needed there to be lots of witnesses, but witnesses who weren't reliable, not necessarily for the wrong reason, perhaps just because their experiences had shaped the kinds of people that they were. So at first I thought I would set it in a prison. Actually, that was my first thought, that it would be within. But then I realised it was going to be within a women's refuge, and I came at it from that way. That was obviously there's different reasons for the women being in the refuge. It's not just domestic abuse, although that is a big theme in the book. But I think it always with me. It starts with the characters. So there might be a theme, but the theme has to have voices behind it. So these women in the refuge were talking quite strongly to me in their different voices about how they felt, about their fears and their courage. And the story came out of that rather than me going, I'm going to write about domestic abuse.
It's interesting because one of the themes in the book, and one of the questions asked, and it's the question always asked of women who are abused, is why don't these women leave these abusive partners? I
think it's a very easy sort of pat thing to say. It might, in one sense, on one hand it does seem to be quite a common sense thing to say, but on the other hand it shows a very limited understanding of psychology and and also of society. Where would you go if you were in that circumstance and you're trapped? How do where's your money going to come from? Where is your home going to come from? I think there's practical considerations, but also I'm always interested in the psychology of the characters above everything else, I think, and I was interested in writing about women who would stay in those situations. And there's one woman in the refuge in Someone Else's Skin who continues to see the person that was abusing her because she realises that the power has changed. And she, by virtue of being in the refuge, she suddenly has an element of power back. And I think it is about power and it's about control.
That suggests a kind of feminist theme in the books, but there's no sense of that being an issue that you're trying to promote in the books.
No, I hate that. I hate reading books where you feel like you're being hit over the head with an issue. It's a bit like an author that's done a lot of research, and you must, because I have learned
it all has
about
to be
this,
in the book.
You have to learn about it as well. I'm not interested in writing textbooks. I love research. I love reading non-fiction books. I read many of them before I wrote Someone Else's Skin. But I think it's a story, it's the momentum that matters, and you need to be able to tell a story, not to try and educate people or inform people. You want to touch them, and if they are moved by what you've written enough to go and understand a bit more about the subject that you've raised, then that's great. But I think it would be boring for everybody, including me, to write about.